Hi, in this video I will show you how I replaced the resonator on my 2007 Volvo S40 2.4 liter.
The last time I replaced the catalytic converter, I noticed that the resonator was damaged due to corrosion and it had to be replaced. To know the cost of the replacement, I checked the price of the resonator sold by Volvo. I found it too expensive to install it on my old Volvo, so I decided to buy a universal Glasspack Resonator. I also needed some fitting parts, and I had to weld some of them together to replace the old resonator. The next step was to get the measurements from the resonator, the flange, and the exhaust pipe. To do it, I lifted the vehicle high enough to be able to work underneath while keeping the work area safe. As usual, the vehicle shifter was on park and the parking brake was engaged. I also used 2 jacks, 2 car ramps, 2 jack stands and many blocks to block the 4 wheels. Here you can see that the side seam of the original resonator was failing. The flange was also damaged by rust, but there was no leak around the gasket. From this flange to the end of the tailpipe, the exhaust system was made of many parts that were welded together. A simple solution was to cut the pipe in this area just behind the resonator. To find some compatible parts, I needed at least the dimensions of the resonator, the inlet, and the flange. Later, I did some Google searches. I found a universal Glasspack Resonator that would fit with the original exhaust system. Knowing the size of the new resonator, I figured out where to safely cut the pipe. When the cut mark was done, I had in mind 2 options to cut the pipe. First of all, I could disconnect the flanges and unhook these 3 hangers to lower the exhaust pipe. By doing it this way, I could use my reciprocating saw. Secondly, I could keep the exhaust pipe in place and use a jigsaw with a long metal blade to cut it without detaching the hangers. I decided to use the jigsaw because it was easier to cut the pipe when it was still attached. I wanted the resonator and the other parts on the same day, so I checked with my local auto parts store to confirm they had them in stock. Later, when the resonator was removed, I brought it with me to the auto parts store. It's always useful to be able to compare old parts with new ones to avoid doing some mistakes. The exhaust flange I bought was made to fit with the resonator inlet and be welded. Instead of buying a universal exhaust hanger to secure the new resonator, I decided to modify the existing hanger assembly. This is how it looked after I cut it. I modified it to fit around the new resonator. The new resonator outlet and the original pipe were not exactly the same size. So I combined this pipe reducer with an internal pipe sleeve I had in stock to better fit the parts together. I began by cutting a section of the pipe reducer and I inserted the pipe sleeve. Then I welded the parts together. As you can see, I'm not a welder, so I only do it out of necessity. After, I fitted the sleeve in the resonator outlet and I did some welding tacks. I checked the alignment with the angle bar placed in different positions around the resonator. I made a small adjustment and then I welded the pipe reducer. Normally this outlet should fit in the old exhaust pipe. When a pipe is too tight or dented, it can be enlarged a fraction or reshaped with a common pipe expander. The inner diameter of the flange can be adjusted with a file like this one to better fit around the inlet. This is a support I made to weld the flange at a proper 90-degree angle. I was able to hold the flange in place with 2 clamps and stabilize the resonator with a weight during the welding procedure. I began by doing some tack welds on the upper side. Then I rotated the assembly half a turn and I secured it again to add more welding tacks. When the welding was completed, it looked messy, but it was good enough to last until I get a new vehicle. On the other hand, the square angle of the flange was quite precise. This is the gasket I bought. Even though it was a bit wider than the flange, it fitted perfectly with the center hole. To be able to install the new resonator, these two exhaust hangers had to be unhooked in order to lower the exhaust pipe. I began with the hanger behind the resonator, then the hanger on the left side of the muffler. After, the resonator outlet was inserted in the exhaust pipe. I loosely put the two flanges together to test the alignment. Then I refitted the two exhaust hangers, this one and the rear one. This is a 2 1/4 inch clamp that fitted well with the original exhaust pipe. Since I had two clamps, I loosely installed both of them before properly mating the flanges together. Next, when the gasket was installed, I tightened the bolts holding the flanges together. One section of the underbody holding this bracket was rusty, so I had to reinforce it with a metal plate to properly install the hanger and support the resonator. At the end, I tightened the nuts of the exhaust clamps, and the installation was completed.
There are other ways to assemble a resonator with other parts without welding them, but I had enough time to weld them together, so I saved even more money.